Hello, it's such a pleasure to introduce my book through the lens of the transatlantic slave trade and myself to you. I'm Dr. Vinita Moch. Prior to self-publishing the book, I taught psychology and social sciences at a community college for 30 years. Then I spent 9 years researching, reflecting, and writing its content. It's a labor of love. So I dedicated it to all the ancestors who were kidnapped from Africa in the transatlantic slave trade, 1444 to 1888. Officially, scholars say that over 12 million participated, but I think it's a whole lot more. And I also dedicate the book to my 10,000 plus community college students from around the world who shared their lives and their talents with me. I experienced humanity at its finest, exemplified and embodied in low-income, urban, hard-working, often minimally or poorly trained community college adults who, despite the odds, continue to seek a better life. My spirit and my humanity were enlarged because of this long-term experience of witnessing my students' dignity, their willingness to come to class, expand and grow despite the odds. I am a better person and more respectful of humanity because of my interactions with my students. What I have learned from the transatlantic slave trade and witnessed in my daily life, unfortunately, is the reality that low-income people are more likely in contemporary society to be considered cargo, and thus more likely to be considered as disposable. My former students, both the men and the women from every race and nationality, could potentially be lured into suspicious work environments that could make them vulnerable to exploitation. They could be shot dead because a cop got scared. Without employment, low-income people, especially those without education, turn to gangs, drugs, and other illegal activities to be okay on planet Earth. Before I say more about my findings, maybe I should tell you more about myself. Shortly after I retired, I read a book called The Slave Trade by historian Hugh Thomas. From this book, a whole new psychological world mixed with financial undertones opened. Suddenly, I got clarity about so much that I had previously simply just misunderstood. I wanted to shout this knowledge from every rooftop. Because the book was 800 pages, I knew few would read it. But this information was too valuable to hide. I decided to write a book, a first-person narrative of my voyage to understanding the transatlantic slave trade, especially how it is still under the radar in our lives today. To collect the relevant data, I decided to live in Italy. From there, I traveled to many African and European countries. After 2 years, I left Europe and moved to Belize. I wanted to live with the people who had received another kind of abuse from the slave trade. You see, the transatlantic slave trade began below the Gulf, as I call it in my book. But when people talk about the transatlantic slave trade, their discussion is often only about the blacks and the Native Americans who reside in the United States, or, as I say in the book, above the Gulf. These people below the Gulf are not even a footnote. Their experiences were different because these people do not exist as a minority group like the Native Americans and the blacks. Their daily experiences were noticeably different. These former colonies with majority non-white populations opened my eyes in valuable new ways. Along the way, I came to realize that my birth in Louisiana and my first 18 years in the Jim Crow South positioned me for a fuller understanding of how easy it is to be in the presence of the slave trade or one of its byproducts, slavery, and not even know it. I began my life living in black-only communities in a racially segregated South. With the passage of affirmative action, I moved to Indiana to a newly integrated white youth ghetto. There were 30,000 college students with approximately 800 non-whites. Here, I experienced culture shock. Here, I got my first of my 3 college degrees. I got my BA, followed by an MA, and then a PhD. In the prologue of my book, I present my first known exposure to human trafficking in central Italy. Africans were lured there with the prospect of jobs, trainings, or both. But these are lies. Once there, they must surrender their passport, then stand on the highways and byways soliciting clients. They are now sex workers. They worked the streets of small and medium-sized Italian cities to pay back the airfare. For most of the immigrants, most often African and Eastern European, I'm sure this too for them was definitely a culture shock. My book has 4 parts. I struggle to understand 1, where are we? Not just the physical where, but also the social, emotional, financial, legal, and spiritual where. 2, how did we get here? I wanted to know the steps, the essential process that the Europeans used to collect, warehouse, sell/market, and maintain slavery for 444 years. 3, what have we learned from these initial but often uninterrupted meetings of people from latitude and longitude countries? I explained that in the book. How has our science helped or hindered this knowledge collection? And 4, I ask and answer a question that few are asking. How do we move forward beyond the disrespectful games that camouflage the pain? Personal autonomy points us in a direction that strengthens our individual and collective spines. Because I wanted people to see what I saw, I created a device for pinpointing the misdeeds, the subtle but nonetheless real-world experiences that hopefully illustrate clearly the slave trade in our midst. Throughout the book, I added the refrain and then centered it. I say, slave trade. After the refrain, I identify the kind of stain or stains that it describes. Over time, I realized that I had identified 7 stains that represented signature experiences that confirmed that you have unwittingly engaged a practice, legislation, or mindset from the transatlantic slave trade. These slaves were created to trap, shame, or embarrass, and then silence the unsuspecting public. Our birthrights were compromised and taken away, first from the African slaves and then humans worldwide. I explained the stain that makes us comfortable with people in authority, the ones who created a world that manipulates everyday people for financial gain for the rich few. During the transatlantic slave trade years, they learned to control the masses, often with written texts like constitutions, biblical scholarships, and laws, to regulate, watch, and gather information and or money from everyday people. For additional control, there are surrogates, such as parents, teachers, religious leaders, police, bosses, politicians, tax collectors, etc., 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 to deliver their corporate message daily. After all, these people have one agenda: to get us employed so we can make money and give it to them. If you're interested in understanding what the essential ingredients are that define, maintain, and sustain the corporate transatlantic slave trade in your life, read my book. Because I have identified the elements in their system, I look forward to sharing. This knowledge will clarify and speed up your journey to recovering your unique humanity. You and your family move away from the systematic stains that are modified at will. The conversation shifts from looking just at the slaves, which is an unproductive pity party, into a whole new paradigm that follows the money. This is far more engaging as I seek to assist you in moving beyond the lethal slavery-based mindsets, aka stains, that consumed too many people in the past. Therefore, These mindsets have and will continue to be delivered unconscious and systematically to current and future generations. To buy the paperback or ebook, go to VinitaMoch.com or to Amazon.com. To learn more about information that I've already shared, go to Facebook and like me at Humans Let's Go Get Free, or to my YouTube channel, Vinita Ricks, for my lie detected episodes. Thank you. Humans, let's go get free.